Okay, hello everyone. So this is the sixth video, and this is going to review the literature review. Okay. All right. So then the literature review is the location where you're going to use all the sources that you collected, and you're going to write it here. Because if you noticed, I did not say that you're going to include your sources in the introduction. I also did not say that you're going to include your sources in the issue section. And I also did not say that you're going to use your sources in the purpose. And if you noticed, what I did do is encourage you to use your own intellectual faculties to be able to develop your ideas for these different sections. But you're going to use your sources to inform what you're going to say. Basically, you're going to use the sources to be able to address these specific points that I've been going over with the preceding videos. Okay, all right. So now I'm just going to go through this section. Okay. Now, for this section, you're going to locate four sources. Okay, this the sources may be a book chapter, chapters, or articles. To organize this portion of the essay, refer to the introduction to assess what you have presented in the introduction and expand on your points you made. But then I also just realized that I did say that you could write the introduction last, so then this point would be a moot point. But if you do decide to if you do decide to write the introduction first, as you're just going through this essay, you have to make sure that based on what you said in the introduction, that you're able to carry it not only through the essay sections or body itself, but then you're able to sort of rephrase or restate what you're going to do here. Okay. And this is sort of looking at the overall cohesion of your argument and the overall context of your paper. Okay. So then what, and then I'm just going to continue reading this paragraph. And then use what you wrote in the introduction to help you curate your argument and context as your reader can understand the context of how your argument relates to it. Use the text listed above to help you in thinking about your topic and to secure your sentences and paragraphs, or sorry, structure your sentences and paragraphs into cohesive argument. All right. And again, I just know that, or just sort of pointing out that if you decide to write the introduction first, that's perfectly fine, but make sure you bring everything down as you're writing, or you can just sort of write the literature review and then use that to be able to help write out the introduction after you're done writing the bulk of the paper. Okay, so there's two ways how you can go about doing this particular section. Okay, now for point B, sorry about that. You are to organize your readings according to the fundamental principles of writing mechanics, logic, coherence, and comprehension. You are to inform your reader of your object of study, provide warrants, and strategically use empirical evidence to support your claims. And then I just wrote a brief note in this parenthetical comment. When you see text that is italicized, it is done for a reason. The writer who places the text in italics is doing this as a means to add emphasis to the text because it is essential to pay attention to it. So then that's why I put this short paragraph in italics, right? Because this is what I want you to pay attention to. Okay. Um, Now, the way that you're going to start writing the intro, sorry, not the intro, yeah, the introduction to the literature review is that you're going to start here with point number one. And what you're going to do is that you're going to write an introductory paragraph explaining the approach you are adopting towards your object of study. And here you have four choices, right? And I'm going to explain what each choice implies. So then for here, I wrote, you're in favor of your object of study. And basically what it's saying is that the approach, or the approach you're adopting is that you're in favor, or you support um, the how the current topic is presented and debated and discussed. All right. And then if I remember correctly, the example that I used in the uh, final presentation going over this particular section, I think I used Bhagwati Jagdish, who wrote a book called In Defense of Globalization. And then the argument that he makes in this book is that globalization is the greatest thing that has ever been invented by human beings. Because according to Professor Bagdish, or sorry, Bhagwati, um, he explains that globalization has spread democracy around the world. It has also spread economic prosperity. It's also helped liberate women from certain social confinement, right? So then he has a very positive view of globalization. So that's what is meant by you're in favor of your object of study. Okay. So that's for point A. Now, for point B, is asking you, are you adopting a critical stance towards your object of study? Meaning that you're not necessarily accepting wholesale what the people are saying, but you're reading it with the critical eye. And this would be what Paul and Elder call the what is it, the critical person. Oh, I forgot the name that they used. If you could find the book. Here it is. So this would be the fair-minded critical person, right? That you're taking that critical stance, and not necessarily utilizing the self-serving critical person, or the uncritical person. So that you're just being critical, or that you're questioning the theory, the arguments, the evidence that is used, right, or even the thesis that is being used. Okay, like for example, for me, in terms of Jagdish Bhagwati's, I'm very critical of his book. Just to sort of give you a point, in terms a counterpoint to what Begwadi says, because in his book explains that globalization has helped liberate women from exploitation. Right. However, a story was recently reported in, I think it was the Financial Times, which is a newspaper that I subscribe to, that's published in Great Britain. And the Taliban, which is the political, or which is the group that's in control of Afghanistan, passed a law not too long ago forbidding women to speak. Period. Women are not allowed to speak. All right. Now just imagine that you're literally told that you're not able to communicate with other women or other people unless you're spoken to by a man. Okay. So then that's sort of what I would classify as being critical. That one piece of evidence contradicts what Begwadi says in his book on the defense of globalization. Okay. So you could definitely take a critical stance. Now, the third, or letter C, is that, are you adopting a balanced approach towards your object of study? And what that means is that you're trying to take either a pro or con, or benefit and cost analysis of a particular issue, right? And this is literally called the compare and contrast. But when you're doing the compare and contrast, or doing a balanced approach, you really have to work hard at treating each side of the debate equally. right? Because you can't just say it's like a balanced approach or pros and cons. You have to explain what you mean by cons and then provide the evidence supporting the claim that it's a con or yeah, a cost. At the same time, showing what the evidence is in terms of the benefit, right? Or the pros. Because without that, it just becomes a jumbled mess, and the reader can't necessarily tell what you're trying to accomplish because those points are not clearly demarcated from each other and not shown the tension that exists between a con and a benefit, right? Or a pro, or yeah, a pro position, right? So again, it goes back to how you develop that imagery, right? It's always important developing the imagery, but it's more so in terms of like doing compare and contrast essays. Okay. And now the last one, or point D, is having you, or is asking you, are you adopting a lamenting stance towards your object of study? Right. Now, the key word in this point is lamenting. Lamenting is a word that means like you're missing something or that you're mournful of something. Like I explained last week, a family member passed away. So then the entire family is lamenting of the loss of our family member. Right. And the way that I tend to use this in my classes, and I use this more specifically in globalization courses that I teach, when I talk about lamenting in relationship to work or to labor. Because what I mean by that is when I was growing up, I remember my junior high school teachers and my high school teachers talking about as long as you're able to graduate high school, it actually reduces the possibility of a person or a youth ending up in prison, more or less. All right. It's an imperfect system, but that's sort of the argument that was presented to us back then. Because you're in school, in class, and you're not outside of class or outside of school where you can get into trouble. Right. But anyway, so then, so then you would work once you graduate from high school. You get a job, entry level job at a company, and you might work for that company for like 20, 30 years, or you might work at a company for 10 years and go to another one, and then just spend the rest of your working time for that one company. And that is literally called lifetime employment. And this is what was considered to be a successful life under the rubric of understanding of lifetime employment. And this is it. So let's just say hypothetically, and this is called the thought experiment. So then let's say that you get it, and you graduate high school, you are able to secure an entry level job at some company, and then you're able to start working your way up into the structure of the company. With the high school education, you can go so far in the structure of the company, and then you're going to max out. So then what that person needs to decide is like, are they going to return to school to earn their degree? Because once they get their degree, then they would get the promotion, and then it would be commensurate with their salary. And this is the idea of social mobility. Okay. And let's say that the person gets their master's and they're able to end up in upper management, and then times come for them to retire. And then at the end of that process, they get a retirement party. They might get a gold watch or some other type of award or certificate or some object to recognize so many years of service to the company. They get a cake. But then once they're going through the retirement process, they get a pension from their company, and then they get Social Security. And then they're able to live their lives. But then what tends to happen, and this tends to happen more with men than women, that men would usually die almost a year after they retired. And the reason why that happens is because people tend to attach their identity or their sense of uh, purpose in life is to work. So they construct their identity through this idea of labor, and then the work is no longer there because of retirement, and then it takes aim at their identity. And then because of that lack of support of their identity going to work, most people tend to die almost a year after not when they graduate, but when they retire. However, that was literally considered a successful life because that single individual who was working, which is tended to be the husband or the male partner, was able to afford and sustain and support their family members and be able to send their kids off to college. Right. And the reason why it's lamenting, right, and I'm discussing it under the rubric of lamenting is because that is no longer the reality for most people. Because how many of you know, or you yourself might have two jobs just to be able to try to pay rent and pay for other living expenses, while at the same time that you're going to school, right? So then that reality that I grew up with is no longer there, right? And the only means to which most people can acquire lifetime employment is by acquiring your degree, because in order to have economic stability, sometimes you need that degree to give you that stability, right? But it's not a hard and fast rule. Is it's sort of the luck of the draw or the roulette or whatever metaphor you want to use, right? Because we're living in economic precarity, or meaning that we're living in economic uncertainty, where most people aren't sure how they're going to make ends meet. All right, so that's what I mean by lamenting. So then you have to decide which one of these four you're going to open with. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. With when you start writing out your essay, okay, for point number one. Now, the next one is point number two, and what you're going to do here is that you're going to write a small thing about what theoretical tradition you're going to adopt, either conflict theory, structural functionalist theory, or symbolic interactionist approach. Because I'm not calling it a theory because Herbert Blumer, who's one of the founders of symbolic interactionism, doesn't necessarily call it a theory, but it's more of an approach of what symbolic interactionism is supposed to do, or supposed to accomplish. Okay. So for example, this is a point that I wanted to make because I don't want to forget. You are not required to go do research and look at conflict theory like Karl Marx or Durkheim or Weber. What I want you to do is just sort of look at what is the main idea of conflict theory, meaning what does conflict theory look at when it's studying social issues, right? The same thing with structural functionalism. You should be able to articulate what is the focus for each theoretical perspective, right? Because like for conflict theory is looking at power differentials among different social groups, and the social groups can be racial, um, political, like Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, independent, racial, the idea of race, all right, or ethnicity, gender and sexuality, class, immigration status, anything that deals with the idea of social power. Conflict theory is a good theory to look at those social disparities. Okay. Now, for conflict theory. Now, for structural functionalism, you're looking at how society is able to function, how social institutions provide social stability, and how the social institutions provide social roles for us to fill in society, and that. So then the institutions are beneficial for society, and then the roles that we play in society helps maintain and perpetuate society. Right. So what you're doing today is what I did as an undergrad student 25 years ago. Right. um, and if you decide to pursue your degree in sociology and teach, you are going to do in the future what I'm doing right now. Instructing, explaining, providing information, background information, and so on and so forth. And this is how structural functionalism helps us understand society. Okay. And then lastly, symbolic interactionism is looking at how people understand their social reality. So, of the three theories, this or theoretical approaches, symbolic interactionism really looks at what people do and how people are able to maintain and perpetuate their understanding of reality compared to structural functionalism and conflict theory, because these two theoretical approaches assume that as large social structures impose their coercive influence on our behavior. If that is true per these theoretical perspectives, then that would imply that we have no free will, and that we're responding more to social pressures and social forces rather than what we believe to be true, wonderful, and good. However, looking at symbolic interactionism is looking at how people themselves are able to create and understand their own reality and how they shared realities and so on and so forth. So, symbolic interactionism is probably more dynamic in terms of how it sees and understands society and social interactions. Okay. So then that's basically what you're going to do. Just sort of explain how these theoretical perspectives will help you frame an argument. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. All right. Along with this and the other video for the final presentation. Okay. And then number three, what you're going to do is explain what your argument you are making about your object of study. So this is pretty much where you're going to implement your thesis statement, right? And again, don't forget, if you had written the introduction already, sorry, you're going to sort of drop some of this stuff, but more specifically points two, three, sorry, three and four, and maybe five into, sorry about that. I don't know why my laptop is doing that. Into this section of the essay. All right. But you don't necessarily just want to copy and paste. You want to be able to rephrase it or restate it, but still maintain the same message. Okay. All right. So, like, that's for point number four. Sorry, number three. And then lastly, point number four, you're going to identify one concept you will use in the body of the literature. And what you're going to do here is this: from the four sources that you're going to collect about your particular project, you're going to select one of the articles and you're going to identify a key word. And a key word is just the word that the author uses, and that they sort of explain what it is, what it's for, what's it about, and how it's going to be implemented. And the word that I used in the presentation video is operationalize. And operationalize is just a way to explain how do you plan to use it in your own writing. All right. So just to sort of give you an example, let's just say hypothetically, actually, let's just look at structural functionalism. One of the a concept from structural functionalism that Durkheim uses is social solidarity. Right. So then, let's just say that I'm not talking about crime, society and crime, but I'm looking at how social institutions provide social stability. So then I would use a concept that Durkheim uses, social solidarity, to explain how these institutions provides the glue to make society possible. Right. An example would be just driving on the freeway, because all of us, even though we have our individuated automobiles that we drive to and from work or to other locations around the city, all of us have to go to the DMV and read the DMV handbook and to read the rules and directions of how to drive a car safely. Right. And then you need to take a written exam to prove that you read the manual and understand what the manual says. And then if you pass the written exam, then you're able to take the driving exam. And then that's when you show or demonstrate to the driving instructor or the evaluator that you did read the manual, and you use the manual as a way to direct your driving habits. So you notice that it's a government agency, the DMV. It has rules and regulations on the proper procedure of how to drive legally in the state of California, and then it tests your base knowledge of driving laws of California, and then you provide the understanding by doing the driving test. And if you successfully accomplish those parts, then you are granted through the state of California a driver's license. All right. And then there's other issues or other factors associated with, but that's sort of the overall general process of how society functions and we're able to drive in society. All right. So then the concept would be social solidarity, right? Because we all have to go through that process. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense, and it makes sense with this video as well as the other video going over the final presentation. And then this is just the last point for you as well. For the literature review, you are to integrate your data and write an informative essay. You can use statistics, direct quotes, or clearly paraphrasing by identifying the author's ideas. You can use graphs and relevant images, but just be warned, if you do use an image, make sure that you reach out to me so I can explain to you how you're going to use the image in the context of your paper. Now, for a 7 to 10 page paper, more or less, you can have at least one or two images, right? But again, I want you to check with me first, and then so I could look at the image and see how big the image is going to be, and then I'll explain to you how to integrate that image not only into your paper, but then also making sure that you provide a text description and explanation and analysis of why that image is relevant to your argument. All right, because you just don't put an image or a table or a graph without telling your reader why you're using it at that particular moment. That's the strategy. That's being strategic, right? So then again, it's just to try to show you that you want to be strategic and not just write and hope what you're writing sticks. Okay. All right. And then the last point I already mentioned earlier is that the text. Sorry, let me go back to the introduction. I mean, the lit review. So the this written text that I have here is not to be used or be shown in the final draft. All this. This is just there to help you address the points and to give you certain direction. But you're going to erase all that, or you're just going to write Roman numeral 4 literature review, and then start writing your first sentence or sentences, and then just follow and address points 1 through 4. right? And then once you're done with one points 1 through 4, the paragraph, the last thing that you